In Tokyo, one of the most watched, most surveilled cities on the planet, is home to an unsolved murder case where the killer left his DNA on everything: the food, the computer, even the toilet, and still vanished without a trace. It's more than just a cold case. It is one of the most disturbing and baffling murders in Japanese history. And the closer you look, the more it will leave you questioning what's real. So sit back, enjoy another beverage, and get comfortable. Because tonight, we're going back to the last night of the year 2000, to a quiet little neighborhood in Tokyo, and to a house where a killer decided to make himself at home. This is the story of the Setagaya Family Murders. Let's start with the place, because the place matters. Japan, at the end of the year, is a country of tradition. December 31st, New Year's Eve, or Omisoka as they call it, is arguably the most important day on the calendar. Families gather, they clean their homes, they eat a special bowl of soba noodles, and they prepare to welcome a fresh start. It's a time of warmth, of closing the door on the old year and opening it on the new, and that's exactly what one family was doing on the night of December 30th, 2000, in a neighborhood called Kamisoshigaya, in the Setagaya ward of Western Tokyo. The Miyazawa family, they weren't famous, they weren't rich. They were the kind of family you'd pass on the street and never think twice about, and that's exactly what makes what happened to them so deeply unsettling. There was Mikio, 44 years old. He worked for a marketing company, a quiet, hardworking man by all accounts. There was his wife, Yasuko, 41, a school teacher. And there were their two children, Nina, who was 8, and Rei, who was 6. Nina was the kind of kid grandparents brag about. She was in 2nd grade, already a year ahead in her studies, and she loved ballet. She'd show off her moves to anyone who'd watch. Rei was 6 years old, and he lived with a mental disability. His parents surrounded him with love and support. Every report, every person who knew them paints the same picture: a gentle, ordinary family that just wanted to be left alone to raise their kids. Now here's a detail that becomes important. The Miyazawa home backed right up against a public park, Soshigaya Park, and just on the other side of their fence, there was a skate park. It's the kind of detail you don't think about until later. That night, the family had spent a normal evening together. They'd been out shopping during the day. They ate dinner at home, they watched television, and at some point they went to bed, the way millions of families across Japan went to bed that night. But the Miyazawas would never wake up to the new year. The first signs something was wrong. Before I tell you what happened inside that house, I want you to understand who these people were, because it matters, and because it's the part of these stories that too often gets skipped. Mikio's mother, Setsuko, kept a shrine to her son and his family for years after. She kept their toys in a glass cabinet, and when she talked about them, there was one thing she couldn't let go of. I always wonder how they would have grown up. My biggest regret is that I never got to see them grow up. She couldn't remember her own son's funeral. The shock was so severe, they had to carry her in. Yasuko's mother, Haruko, lived next door, right next door. And that proximity, that closeness, is what set everything in motion on the morning of December 31st. Here's what happened. Haruko had a routine. Every morning she'd call her daughter. It was a simple thing, a mother checking in on her daughter and grandchildren. But on the morning of December 31st, the call didn't go through. The line was dead. Now, some reports say the killer cut the phone lines before he murdered the family. Others, including some of the most careful researchers on this case, say that's not quite right, that the disconnection may have been something else entirely. I'll be honest with you, the details here are murky, and they always have been. But what's not murky is what Haruko did next. She couldn't reach them, so she walked next door. She rang the doorbell. No answer. She let herself in. and what she found in that house would become one of the most famous, most haunting crime scenes in the history of Japan. I need to warn you before I go further. This is where it gets hard to hear. If you're not in the mood for the details tonight, this is your moment. But this story deserves to be told, and told honestly, so I'm going to tell you exactly what she saw. Haruko stepped inside, and the first thing she saw was her son-in-law. Mikio was slumped at the bottom of the staircase near the front door. He'd been stabbed multiple times. There was no mistaking it. He was gone. She moved through the house, and upstairs she found her daughter Yasuko and her granddaughter Nina. They had been stabbed violently and repeatedly. Haruko, a mother and a grandmother, touched them, searching desperately for any sign of life, and there was none. And then, around the corner in his bedroom, she found Ray. The 6-year-old was still in his bed. He hadn't been stabbed, he'd been strangled. And here's the detail that has haunted every investigator who ever worked this case. Police believe Ray was killed first. He was strangled in his sleep before the violence began. He never knew what happened to his sister, his mother, his father. There's a version of mercy buried in that horror, and it's the only one this case offers. Haruko called the police, covered in her family's blood. Now, I want you to hold on to something. The grandmother who found them initially said she'd opened the door with her spare key, but in her later years, she wasn't so sure of even that. The shock of that morning never really left her, and honestly, how could it? The retired police chief who worked this case, a man named Takeshi Tsuchida, spent 41 years as an officer. He was the chief of the Seijo police station when this happened, and decades later, he still couldn't let it go. He said the faces of the victims were seared into his memory, the way the murdered look different from those who die of natural causes. They have furious facial expressions. They are mortified and regretful. And when he described the brutality, the way the killer finished them, he said something that stayed with me. There are no other cases in which the victims have been cut up like this. This wasn't a quick, clean crime. This was something else entirely. Now let's go to the murders, what actually happened that night. Back to the night itself and reconstruct what the investigators believe happened minute by minute. It was just past 11:30 at night. The family was asleep. The killer didn't walk through the front door. He came in through the back, through the second-floor bathroom window. That window faced Soshigaya Park. Investigators found the window screen lying on the ground outside. They found footprints in the mud. The theory is he climbed the fence, climbed up an air conditioning unit, and slipped through that bathroom window into the house. He went to Ray's room first. Ray was asleep. The killer strangled him with his bare hands. And this is where the story takes a turn, because here's the thing. Mikio, the father, heard something, or at least the evidence suggests he did. He rushed up from the first floor toward the sound, toward his son's room. What happened next was a fight. Mikio fought back. He actually injured the killer. We know this because the killer's own blood was found mixed into the scene. Mikio got close enough to wound him, but the killer had a knife, a sashimi bocho, a long, thin fish knife, and in that struggle, the blade broke off inside Mikio's head. The force of it was so violent that part of the blade was left lodged there. Let me sit with that for a second. A knife blade broke off inside a man's skull. That's the level of force we're talking about. Mikio died at the bottom of those stairs. Then the killer went back for Yasuko and Nina. He attacked them with that same broken knife. And then, when that blade was spent, he went into the Miyazawa's own kitchen, took a Santoku knife, their own kitchen knife, and used it to finish what he'd started. Police believe he kept stabbing Yasuko and Nina long after they were already dead. The wounds went far beyond what was necessary. This was rage, or something that looks exactly like it. 4 people, a father, a mother, an 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, all gone in the space of about half an hour. And then, and this is the part that separates this case from almost every other murder in history, the killer didn't leave. This is the part I find the most disturbing, and I think you will too. The killer stayed inside that house for somewhere between 2 and 10 hours. With the bodies of the family he'd just murdered still lying where they fell, he didn't flee. He didn't panic. He made himself at home. He went to the refrigerator and he ate 4 ice creams out of their freezer, a melon. He drank 4 bottles of barley tea. Investigators could track it, the empty containers, the evidence left behind. He used the family's computer. At 1:18 in the morning, the computer connected to the internet, and it stayed connected until 1:23, just 5 minutes. What was he looking up? Nobody knows for certain. But he sat at their desk, in their home, and browsed the internet, while a family lay dead around him. He used their toilet, and he didn't flush. And that, gruesome as it sounds, is one of the most important clues in the entire case, because from what he left behind, police were able to determine that he'd eaten string beans and sesame seeds the day before. That's the level of detail this investigation reached. Some reports say he even took a nap on the sofa in the second-floor living room. I can't verify that one for you. The evidence on that point isn't solid. But it's not hard to believe, given everything else. He treated his own injuries. He'd been cut in that fight with Mikio, and he used the family's first aid kit and sanitary supplies to bandage himself up. He went through their drawers and papers, ransacking, dumping some of it in the bath and the toilet. He did take some money, but here's the strange part. He left more behind than he took. And then eventually, he walked out, through the same window or out some other way, into the dawn of New Year's Eve, the most important morning of the year in Japan, and he simply disappeared. Here's where this case becomes genuinely unbelievable, because the killer left behind everything except his name. He left his clothes, a shirt, a jacket, a hat, gloves. He left a scarf, a hip bag, 2 handkerchiefs. He left the murder weapon. He left his shoes. Now the shoes were a brand called Slazenger, made in South Korea. And here's the kicker. They were a size that was never sold in Japan. That single detail sent the investigation international because it meant the killer might not even be Japanese. The shirt he left behind, police determined that only 130 of those shirts were ever manufactured and sold. 130 in the entire world. They've tracked down 12 of the people who bought one. 12. The other 118 owners are still unaccounted for. And then there's the DNA, the thing that should have solved this case instantly. The killer's DNA and fingerprints are all over that house, and his blood revealed something investigators had never expected. The killer is male, and he's of mixed ancestry. His paternal line points to East Asia, a haplogroup common in Korea, China, and Japan. But his maternal line traces back to Europe, possibly the Mediterranean, possibly further east, into the Caucasus region. A man with a European mother's bloodline and an East Asian father's who left Korean-made shoes in a size never sold in Japan. And inside that hip bag he left behind, investigators found trace amounts of sand. They analyzed it, and the sand, they said, matched the desert of the American Southwest, specifically an area near Edwards Air Force Base in California. Now, I want to be careful with that one because there's disagreement about it. Some researchers have pushed back on the Nevada/California sand claim, and there was also sand that matched a skate park in Japan. So I'm not going to tell you this is settled fact because it isn't. But I'll tell you this, it's one more thread in a case that has more threads than answers. The killer is believed to have been around 170 centimeters tall, thin, his waist between 70 and 75 centimeters, based on the hip bag. Right-handed, type A blood. He injured his hand in the struggle, and depending on which estimate you look at, he was anywhere from 15 to 35 years old at the time. The estimate has actually shifted over the years as new analysis has come in. They know the food he ate the day before. They know the clothes he wore. They know his DNA, his blood type, his shoe size, his waist size, the sand in his bag, the website he browsed. They know everything about this man except who he is. So the question becomes, how do you not catch a man you know this much about? This investigation is one of the largest in Japanese history. Over 246,000 investigators have worked it. More than 12,000 pieces of evidence have been collected. Every single one of them is still in custody, preserved. For years, 40 officers were assigned to it full-time. Even now, decades later, officers are still assigned to it, and every year police make a pilgrimage back to the house for a memorial ceremony. And here's the thing that eats at the people who worked it: the motive. They can't figure out why. Why did this man climb through a second-floor window and murder an entire family? Why did he enter a room that was lit? Was it for money? Was it a grudge? Was it something else entirely? There are theories, and in this case, they run the full spectrum from the plausible to the outlandish. Some investigators looked at that skate park behind the house and asked, was this a disgruntled skater, a young man who'd been in conflict with Mikio over noise complaints, who took it too far? The killer's clothes and suspected age would fit a young skater. Others, including one investigative journalist who wrote a whole book on it, believe the killer was a former South Korean soldier turned killer for hire. His theory: the man was hired, in part, over compensation money the family had received tied to the expansion of that park behind their home, and his reasoning for why the killer was so careless, leaving his clothes, his knife, his DNA everywhere, is crazy. I couldn't help but think that he was confident he would not get caught, that the criminal was not Japanese, did not live in Japan, and immediately escaped overseas. And then there are the smaller, stranger details that still haunt this case. On April 9th, 2001, the 100th day after the murders, a small stone statue of Jizo, a Buddhist guardian, was placed at the Sangawa River, just west of the Miyazawa home. Nobody knows who put it there. Some believe it was someone connected to the crime, quietly marking the anniversary. This case became so famous that it's directly tied to a change in Japanese law. Japan once had a statute of limitations on murder. After a certain number of years, a killer could no longer be prosecuted. The Setagaya murders became a rallying point to abolish that limit for crimes that could carry the death penalty, and in 2010 it was removed. The reward for information has climbed over the years. It now sits at 20 million yen. The house itself stood for years as a grim landmark, guarded around the clock, until it was finally demolished in 2019 because it was falling apart. The family fought to keep it standing as a reminder, but even walls give way eventually. So who murdered the Miyazawa family? A man whose mother's blood came from Europe and whose father's came from East Asia. A man who ate ice cream and browsed the internet while a family lay dead around him. A man who left behind his clothes, his knife, his blood, his fingerprints, his shoes, and the food he ate the day before, and walked into the new year and into the dark and never came back. And that's where the story sits tonight, unresolved, waiting. Let me know in the comments what you think, and I mean it. I genuinely want to hear your theory. Was it a disgruntled neighbor, a hired killer who fled the country? Or is the truth something even stranger, something nobody's guessed yet? And if you haven't already, I strongly encourage you to watch my video on the Hinterkaifeck murders, the German farm where a killer stayed for days, feeding the animals, living among the dead. It's a story that will leave you questioning reality, and honestly, it pairs with this one in a way that'll keep you up at night. that's gonna do it for us tonight. If you enjoy dark stories like this one, stay up to date and subscribe to the channel, get friendly with the like button, and comment below. Until next time, good night.